Hello everybody, it's I'm Brian the Pirate, and today's video is probably going to be more of a talking headpiece whilst I vocalize my thoughts about Season 2 of Last Epoch. There'll be some random shenanigans going on in the background, I'm sure. First things first, the content. It's been a while since we've had any. A long while, over a year. And suddenly, they drop on us this gargantuan beast. Feels more like an expansion than like just a new season, but of course they had that entire year to build all this content up, and we know that moving forward they intend on doing the more established like quarterly cycle, like every 3 to 4 months, dropping down some more content, some new seasons thereafter, where they're not likely to be as gargantuan. But to touch on that for just a moment, that is something I'm a little bit curious about, because obviously they've had a year to really pump out some extra content, and it's good, spoiler, but have they also potentially set themselves up for failure? And what I mean is more perceived failure. So when we have this next update in 3 to 4 months, and it's obviously significantly smaller, will the player base be like, why is this update so small? Forgetting the fact that there is a distinct difference in the amount of time spent on creating that content to begin with. That's just a minor curiosity I have, but I suspect it is something that may crop up in the future. Let's talk about Season 2 and how I feel about the game. I'm enjoying it. I think the extra endgame content was very much needed. I think it adds a lot of flavor. The tombs and the cemeteries of the erased, quite fun. I think the tombs should probably be a little bit more sparse. I have found myself now just running past some of them because it's like I've got plenty of echoes and there's probably going to be a cemetery of the erased, which obviously gives you substantially more stuff anyway along my path going through the monolith tree, or monolith web, I suppose. So I do kind of wish there was just a little fewer of them, just to make the tombs, when you do randomly come across them in your monoliths, just feel a little bit more special, and you can be like, ooh, look, a little tomb of the erased, let's jump in that bad boy. Whereas at the moment it feels like it's pretty much every other map, so again, I just end up running past a lot of them now. I'm really enjoying the additional like bosses and monsters that have come with the tombs and the cemeteries of the erased. New champion mobs are really cool. Occasionally a little bit rippy. I'm enjoying a lot of the new items, the cocoons uniques, just for that little like second gamba roll kind of thing, that little bit of a surprise of an LP based unique. One thing I really want to lather some praise on is the crafting system. I am very fond of the LE crafting system. I've said it prior to release in previous videos. I genuinely believe it is the best crafting system in any action RPG ever, and it's not even close. I think they've met this perfect balance where it's a little bit deterministic, so you don't feel cheated by RNG, but if you do lose out to RNG, there are, one, it feels fair, and two, there are ways to still recover the item, be it with one of the new mechanics where you can basically set it so it has 0 LP again, and then get a nemesis egg to give it LP again, and then you can try rolling things and all that shenanigans. It's very cyclical, but you're still not able to just immediately craft all of the best loot on the planet. Whereas in comparison to, say, Path of Exile 2, RNG is just so much of an influence that it almost makes crafting, unless you are extraordinarily rich and can just spam all the omens and chaos orbs, etc., and divines and whatnot, then it just doesn't feel worth it, and you just end up buying the loot that you want rather than crafting it instead. Whereas I find a lot of the time with Last Epoch, I am constantly crafting, either during the campaign when I just need a bit of an upgrade. It's like, oh, my damage is dropping off a bit. Oh, I'll just spam some more damage on my weapon if I've got some forging potential for spare, and if not, then oh, there's a new base that I can try and make a better weapon with in the first place anyway. So to reiterate, very fond of the crafting system, best in class. Really like the new additions and how it just adds to the chase. There's chase in the crafting and it feels like it's achievable. I think that's the important thing, knowing that when I put an item in the forge, that there's actually a chance I will get the thing that I want to get. And it's a wonderful feeling, as opposed to going, in Path of Exile, here's a base. Oh, it's bricked. I'll find another 12 more then, I guess. Speaking of Path of Exile, obviously there's been very recently a lot of comparisons between the two. I just made one then, in fact. And I think there is definitely room to compare the two games. However, I think a lot of people are also not really being mindful that the audiences, the core audiences, let's say, are different between the two games. Yes, there is some overlap. I like both of the games, for example, but they are going to be fundamentally different. For example, a lot of people are complaining that are Path of Exile fans about the easiness of the campaign in Last Epoch. But if you take a step back and think, well, what's the audience for Last Epoch? It's a little bit more casual compared to the Path of Exile audience. So most people are probably actually looking for an easier campaign experience because they're going to be spending less time in the game altogether anyway compared to someone who perhaps plays Path of Exile. And also because, like with many action RPGs, the end game is like where the true game is, and some people just want to get there as fast as possible anyway, and the campaign is perceived in many instances as a tutorial. On the other hand, there's people who really like how blasty Last Epoch is, that you can just shred and devour enemies in your path and absolutely annihilate them with 1 or 2 button pushes, and it's intended, whereas comparatively in Path of Exile, especially 2, you are supposed to be a lot more engaged in the combat. It's a lot more difficult. You have to fight packs one at a time unless you're playing one of the broken builds like Lightning Spear, for example. But one thing I'm particularly noticing with these comparisons when I'm reading them either online or hearing about them in videos, etc., or even in people's streams, it seems to be that there's, not everyone obviously, but there's definitely like on either team, particularly loud groups that seem to be extraordinarily tribal about it. And that perplexes me. Like, you don't have to like both games. I'm not saying that at all. But if you don't like one game because you prefer the other, why are people feeling the need to go out of their way to shit on the other? Like, why? Just continue enjoying the one you've got. Or perhaps, again, taking a step back, look and be like, oh, 2 cool games that do things slightly differently. I've got a lot of options, kind of thing, you know? It's like the meme where it's like, oh, here's a cake. Oh, a second cake. Like, be happy that you've got 2 fundamentally different games, because if they were both the same, then there would be no need to have both of them in the first place, would there? And there's nothing wrong with being critical. There are things that I dislike about both games, things that I think the devs will need to hear feedback on, and hopefully over time they will make adjustments to make things better. But this bizarre tribalism of having to hate one game and love the other and vice versa, it just seems very asinine to me and a bit of a waste of time. And statistically, the vast majority of people who play action RPGs are people in their 30s, so it's also kind of surprising at how immature it is. But enough about the comparisons. Let's continue talking about Last Epoch. The campaign, let's talk about that. Is it too easy? I think yes and no. At the moment, we've got 2 particularly strong, I don't want to say just builds, because one of them is just the Sentinel. The Sentinel has been reworked, and there's a number of builds that the Sentinel can do that are extraordinarily strong. Overpowered, perhaps. And that it's the new hotness, so quite a lot of people are playing it, and therefore a lot of people are finding the campaign easy. However, if you weren't to play the Sentinel or a Heartseeker Rogue, for example, you're probably not thinking, oh my god, this campaign is incredibly easy. It's easy. It is easy, but not too easy, if you know what I mean. So I think that's something that needs to be considered, that the build you're playing is probably potentially broken, and therefore that is what is giving you the perception that it is perhaps too easy. I do like that the Last Epoch campaign is a little easy. I like being able to just blast through mobs, especially if you're someone who knows what they're doing, like I do. I've played the game for quite some time. It's a comfy play style to start your action RPG experience at the beginning of a new, in this case now, seasons as opposed to cycles, where for the first 6-7 hours you can just blast and not think about things too much, just have a good time. And then you start ramping up the difficulty as you get into monoliths, and then empowered monoliths, building up your corruption. And that's the thing as well. It's not that the entire game is easy. If you're looking for challenge, you have the tools to enable that challenge. Of course, there's the new Uber Aberoth fight as well. And Aberoth isn't exactly like the most easy boss in the world. So I'm sure there's going to be someone who's going to jump in the comments and be like, actually, Brian, Aberoth is the easiest boss in the world. And to that I say congratulations. But most people have a difficult time of it and enjoy it. And personally, I'm a fan of the whole scope of Last Epoch, that it does start off easy and slow and steadily gets more difficult until you get to the very end, where you do have the tools to just ramp it up as much as you like. And I would say one of the reasons I really appreciate it is because when I do just want to go balls to the wall difficulty, I'll play Path of Exile 2, where I often avoid like the meta broken builds in the first place to add that little bit more difficulty, that little bit more flavor. So I've got those options. One thing I would like to see toned down a little bit, I think, is the item acquisition. I like that I'm able to find gear relatively easy, craft the gear that I want, use the Merchant's Guild if I'm trying to make lots of builds at once. Things like that is very convenient. There's the Circle of Fortune if you want a little bit more of that satisfaction of finding your own loot and things like that. That's all great, but it does somewhat rain from the sky, and I think not just for newer players, but even myself, it can be a little bit overwhelming because I don't like the idea that I'm forced to customize and add so much detail to my loot filter. I love that we have a native loot filter built into the game. I wish other games would do that as well. And I find it incredibly helpful and even satisfying to a degree to be able to be like, okay, I no longer need this loot, so I will disable this rule and so on and so forth. But in the current iteration of Last Epoch, I feel like I have to spend an extraordinary amount of time preparing my loot filter before I've even finished the campaign, because there's just so much loot to look at. I suppose in some ways you could probably just go, yeah, disable everything and ignore most things until you only get the exalted items you want and so forth. But obviously that's, you know, that's a bit finicky. It's a bit fannying about that you probably want to avoid. At the same time, I don't want to be like, yeah, new league, new season, let's go. Okay, just give me an hour whilst I sort out my loot filter, and then we can continue with actually leveling up my character. Do you know what I mean? I've seen a lot of people remark that it feels a little bit like Diablo 3, where it's just constantly beams of light. And honestly, I get that. I think that's probably the only real comparison you can make to Diablo 3. And I do still think there's a fantastic like loot acquisition or loot chase within Last Epoch. But I, again, do think that the sheer amount of loot that gets rained on you is almost, to a degree, a little bit fatiguing, where you end up going, ugh, some more uniques. Do I even bother looking at them kind of thing if it's not the things that I actually want? And it's, I just think if they just toned it down just a little bit, it will help loot feel valuable still. I'm not saying that the value of loot is completely diminished by how much is being rained down upon you, but because of the amount that it is being rained down on you, it is diminished, and it doesn't have to be. I've also been seeing a lot of commentary on the graphics. I think the graphics are fine, honestly. Like a lot, it blows my mind that people are like, oh, it's like a PS1 or a mobile game. And I'm just there going, really? Is it though? Like, sure, it isn't as beautiful or spectacular as Path of Exile 2, or even to a degree Diablo 4 has very good graphics. But they are nice, and it's got an art style to it that I think will actually age quite well. And honestly, graphics aren't everything, and the gameplay is fucking fantastic. Again, if you like blasting through things, you're going to have a good time with Last Epoch. If you like being able to come up with your own builds and just, like, I actually said this to someone on Twitter. It was another content creator where they were new to Last Epoch, and they're like, oh, what do I do in terms of build? Like, can you recommend one? And I was like, pick a skill, find something that you think looks cool and you vibe with, and just lean into it. And you're very likely going to make a good build because you're a competent builder. Obviously, there's going to be people there who are like, Brian, I don't know how to build things. I just see the button and I panic and push it all. It's a learning curve, sure. But it's not so gargantuan and overwhelming as, say, a Path of Exile game, but yet not so brain-numbingly stupid and easy as, say, a Diablo game. And whilst I can see the Last Epoch devs adding more depth with each iteration, with each patch, with each season, I still think they've managed to maintain this really exquisite balance of not too simple, not too deep, not too overwhelming. It's just this nice middle ground that I think a lot of people, if they actually give the game a chance, will really appreciate. Especially if they make those changes that I think they should make. Tombs of the Erase, slightly less frequent. maybe tone down how much loot we get. Oh, and dungeons, they are still kind of like, like you're doing Jura, and I'm sure in 99% of cases, people are now skipping the dungeon and doing just the time skip charm. I can't remember the name of it. But then, of course, you've got the scale charm where it's like, do you want some loot lizards? And it's like, no, not really. I'm not going to do the dungeon for loot lizards, especially when you've got the Weaver's Tree where you can just spam all those loot lizard nodes and you get all the loot lizards anyway. So yeah, overall, I'm pleased with what they've done. I'm somewhat nervous about the size and how much content we're going to get in the future with each of these like 3 to 4 month updates. I hope also that they manage to time it a little bit better with Path of Exile 2, because I do enjoy both games and I want to be able to have time to invest in each game, especially as a creator where I want to make lots of videos, lots of builds and things for each game. Like April has been fantastic because I've had Path of Exile 2, I've had Last Epoch, I'm going to have No Rest for the Wicked in another week or so. And then I'm probably going to bounce onto the first Berserker Kazan for a little bit. And then hopefully we'll have Path of Exile 1's 3.2.6. But it's all very cramped together. And I've not really been able to fully enjoy the game or games as much as I would like. So hopefully they'll be able to time it so we can get like a month of Last Epoch before we get a month of Path of Exile 2 or Path of Exile 1 and so forth. What do you guys think? Do you think it's fair to compare Path of Exile 2 to Last Epoch so directly? Do you think you can only like one game or the other? Do you think the campaign needs to be easier? Do you think it needs to be harder? Do you want the monolith system to be harder? What is it that you would like to see come to this game, and what is it that do you think EHD do really, really well? Leave your unhinged but polite takes in the comments below. If you like the video, you should probably like it because it helps quite a lot with the algorithm gods. I also stream on Twitch, twitch.tv/Brian the Pirate. Like, subscribe, ding the bell, all that shenanigans. Thank you all very much for watching. Farewell. I'll remember you.